Welcome to We Are North Texas, a podcast brought to you by the University of North Texas system that focuses on innovation, compassion, ideas, and accomplishments in our home region of Dallas-Fort Worth. The UNT system is the only university system based in DFW and includes the University of North Texas, UNT Health Science Center, and UNT Dallas. With our heart in North Texas, we transform lives and create economic opportunity through education. Welcome to the We Are North Texas podcast. I am Paul Corliss, Chief Communications Officer for the University of North Texas System. And today we welcome Ron Kirk, former mayor of Dallas, as well as former U.S. ambassador and member of President Barack Obama's cabinet. Probably I should call him Ambassador Kirk, but I know him as our mayor. So Mayor Kirk, great to talk to you again. Thanks for joining us on the podcast today.
Good to be with you, and good to be with the University of North Texas again.
Well, we appreciate your support over the years, especially last time we talked about UNT Dallas and our College of Law, and you've been somebody that's been instrumental in the growth of the UNT system. So thank you for that support.
You bet.
I'm going to jump right into our topic today, and I want to get your perspective on George Floyd's tragic death on May 25th and the racial tensions that followed, because my perspective as a 45-year-old white male is a little different than yours as a black male who grew up in segregated Austin. So what's been going in your head as you've seen the last couple of weeks, Mayor Kirk?
Well, Paul, and I appreciate you giving me this opportunity to say that, but I mean, I don't know that anything that I'm going to share with you is going to be anything different you've heard from most African Americans that have spoken out on this. It is a combination of pain that many of us have carried around sort of in our gut since at least the murder of Trayvon Martin 10 years ago. And it just sort of festers and boils every time we see another case, whether it's Tamir Rice or Sandra Bland or Tatiana Jefferson or Eric Garner or, Michael Brown and so on, now ending in George Floyd. And I think part of that pain comes from a reality that but for this unique intersection of Mr. Floyd's tragic murder, not only being captured on videotape in such a graphic detail that the video in and of itself makes a lie of all of the arguments we've ever heard in the overwhelming majority of cases where unarmed African Americans, and particularly black men, have been killed by police. That video, and especially the officers' calmness and casualness, suggest a level of immunity and undeniability that, one, they thought they could get away with it, and all those lies that so many in the broader community sort of have to hold on to as a fiction to justify not wanting to address these, are just blown away. He didn't run. He didn't disobey. He didn't fight back. He didn't do anything but plead like a wounded animal almost trapped in a cage and just say, I can't breathe. And I think that resonated. But I also believe because it happened during this pandemic, which has reminded all of us both how small the world is and how much, as my former pastor at St. Luke Community United Methodist Church used to tell us, in a world in which we're all linked now by communications and technology and transportation and disease, you really can't take any comfort from the hole in my end of the boat. But this pandemic has had all of us at home paying more attention to the news in a way that we wouldn't have before. And I'd love to believe, had this not been in this pandemic, Paul, we'd be here, but I don't think so. Because you think about it, there have been other videos.
Right.
I mean, we've seen the video of Tamir Rice. We saw the video of Eric Garner. We saw the video of poor Ahmaud Arbery. None of those seem to incite all of America to not only a conversation, but a collective recognition that this type of inhumane treatment of one race of people by another is unacceptable. And in a way, I think the pandemic, because as one young person commented to me, there's nowhere for people to run. There's no baseball, no basketball playoffs, no, NFL training camp, schools not in. So parents, there was nothing else to distract us. And so to some degree, it almost created this visual funnel that forced all of Americans of all races to just see the sheer inhumanity of this act. And I think all of us felt that in the gut, the way Black people in particular. But for us, to some degree, that is a modest degree of relief that finally we've seen other people react to this. But there's always there's also this deep-seated frustration. Why did it take this? Because we've had past conflicts between particularly the police and African American males. And I think some of the pain, some of the frustration you're feeling from us is we always thought if it's just my word against the police, the public's going to reflexively buy he resisted, didn't pay attention, didn't listen to orders. He ran, he fought, he reached for a gun, he made some action. And then we thought, well, now we've got body cams. We not only have recorders in the car, we have body cams, and we have cell phone videos. And so many times that was put out there, and we still didn't get justice. And so I think some of what you're hearing from the African American community is just like someone has finally released a valve on not just 10 years of pain and frustration, but, some would argue, a 420-year, march towards our fight for just asking America to do what we've promised all one another, love us. Let us have access to the tools we need to build the kind of lives, the kind of communities, the kind of economic success so that our families can benefit from this country the way others have. So, I know that's longer than you may
wonderful perspective.
A podcast, but it's a very complex time. But there is this sliver of hope that maybe this will be different, that this will be a call to action to the country, the way the murder of Emmett Till was in 1955, and John Johnson's courage of putting that picture in Jet magazine, the way America was forced to confront just the brutality against peaceful marchers in Selma and Montgomery, with Dr. King's very, very prescient decision to say, I want the cameras, I want the news to be here so that all of America sees what's happening to us. So one, there is a pain, there is a relief that the country is now forced to recognize this, but there's also a weariness because we've been here before, tinged with a little bit of hope that maybe, just maybe, this time we can move beyond a conversation about race to actually doing something about it.
What do you think is the key to actual change happening? How can the and I hate to use the term momentum, but the people are upset and voicing their opinion, right? How does that lead to tangible action?
Well, it's complex. Look, we after the Selma and the Montgomery marches, we put in at least the legal framework to say, hey, we have this document we all pledge fidelity to called the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And throughout the court system over the years, we have exercised our rights, and thanks to courageous lawyers and principal judges, The courts have ruled the words enshrined in the Constitution mean nothing if they don't apply to all of us. And we got Civil Rights and Voting Rights Act. And I think there will be an effort. I mean, it feels like right now we are correctly, but also maybe disproportionately focusing on police reform. But I think we're hopeful. Look, we've got to look at the broader pain inflicted on our communities. Whereas in Texas, you've got this pandemic, and not just Texas, almost every state in the country, Black people, poor Blacks and Hispanics are dying at almost 3 times the rate of whites. And in a state like Texas, we need to address the elephant in the room and saying, why the hell does Texas, with the highest number of uninsured people in our state than any, the highest number of uninsured children, still insist on rejecting federal Medicaid funds that would go a long way to eradicating that? Why we still have equal access to economic opportunity and education, but we want to do all of those things. But Paul, I've got to tell you, I've had so many conversations with so many Black people have sort of grown weary of trying to tell white people what you need to do to stop frame. White families need to sit down with their children and honestly say, what is it that you fear about us? What is it that makes you so afraid of Black Americans that you can so comfortably adopt all the fictions you do that justify the killing of an unarmed Black man sitting in his home when a police officer walks in and shoots him, or a Black woman playing video games with their kids, or a 12-year-old kid in the park? It's going to take white America honestly saying, looking at our lives, why haven't we had this conversation before? Black families don't have the luxury of not having to talk with our kids about racism. And for many of us, that starts well before we even get to be school age. Well, it's time for white America to have that conversation. Search your hearts. Look around your office. We're in a city, in a region, in the city of Dallas at least, that's almost 70% Black and Hispanic. Next time you walk in your office, ask yourself, boy, why isn't that reflected in the diversity of my office? Why is it that we have a African American history program every year, and we have to go outside to find somebody to come speak to us, and then check the box and say we've done that, and we walk away from it? Why don't my kids bring home their Black friends to come over and play, as comfortably as they do kids in the neighborhood? This needs to become a very personal examination, I think, of every family about how we think about humanity, how we think about race, and what our response is to it. And it is no longer acceptable to say, well, that was 40, 50 years ago. That wasn't us. That was our grandparents, those other people. No, this is still going on today. So yes, we need to address some of those systemic issues, but this is the places that are one reason I was excited to do this podcast. There is no better laboratory for intellectual freedom to talk about different issues than a college campus. That's right. What you do. We try to provide a forum for young people to grow and find their voice and speak out on the issues that are important to them, and to hear contrasting views without just saying you're wrong, and understand there's two sides to everything. And you don't grow by only traveling, roads that are paved smooth with no potholes. We grow by getting off-road, going up here, falling in ditches, and emotionally and intellectually, we do the same. So I'm hoping this is one place that our young people in our colleges and universities, in our churches, are willing to tackle this issue and speak to America's heart the same way young people led the charge for marriage equality and the recognition of the rights of those in the LGBT community. And young people have always provided that, been that force for change in our country, whether we've recognized it.
No, I think if you look at the demographics of the protesters, there was a lot of youth there, which perhaps gives reason for optimism. But how do you take, that moment of being part of this dialogue and then put it into action is I guess the question. We had a town hall at our flagship university in Denton last Friday that was a virtual town hall with the president, and students spoke about, and mostly black students spoke about how they've been profiled on campus and how they've had negative experiences where they felt stereotyped or disrespected or dismissed. And you listen to that, but what's an appropriate next step as a leader? You're obviously, you've been a leader, most of your professional life. When you soak that in and take that information, then what? What's the next step?
Well, then we change. Listen, I remember when I became mayor, Paul, I was asked if I would sit down and this was ironically 25 years ago that I was elected mayor. And a number of our brothers and sisters in the Muslim community asked if I was meet with them. They're a small part of our community, but a growing part. And they felt that Muslims in particular were very easy scapegoats for fear because of the practice of and all they asked is that I would just be attuned to that. Was my own experience growing up African American. And very quickly after that, we had a horrible incident in Oklahoma where a woman killed her 2 kids, but she went on TV and said, "Oh, it was a couple of guys dressed with, she painted the picture of somebody Muslim, as if some Muslim wanted to drive to Oklahoma and steal somebody's 2 kids and drown them." That having had that conversation with them changed my thinking about how we would respond to that, and at least saying, look, let's not be so quick to judge. And these conversations about race are difficult. We all have codes of conduct, and we've all adopted, when I say we, institutions have adopted anti-discriminations. We've checked all the boxes. So it's hard to believe, when a student comes in and says, look, I feel like Professor so-and-so, and we think, oh, we've got a deal that couldn't happen. Well, now we're going to have to say, maybe that's not the case. Let's really look deeper. Let's really challenge ourselves to how we treat one another. And if we do that, we also have to give ourselves enough space to realize, look, we live in a world, you got a college campus where you've got a lot of first generation kids, particularly at our university here in Dallas, that have grown up in DISD with people black and white and brown and Muslim. But you also got kids that are coming to your campus that are going to school with somebody from a different faith, a different culture, a different sexual orientation for the first time in our life. We've got to give them the space to speak honestly and say, look, I understand that without condemning everybody, and throwing them under the bus, and understand, look, if we don't learn to listen to one another and address these issues, and always try to say, start with the common thing. We're here to get an education. And that means we want to use that education to get a good job. We believe grades important. Let's make sure we have a system that says we aren't unfairly, through unconscious bias, judging kids differently because of the way their name is spelled, their dialect. We're giving everybody that chance to succeed, invest in themselves, and do it. And it's going to be hard work. We do it step by step. Look at our faculty, look at our hiring, look at everything we're doing to make sure we have not just as inclusive an environment, but one that is as free from prejudice as we can make it. And just start with the fact, look, how much energy does it take to just treat everybody the way you'd want to be treated? Right. I should have said that, for those of us that are people of faith, it's that. And if you don't like that, a guy, Robert Fulghum, wrote a book that was the rage 30, 40 years ago. Everything you need to know, you learned in kindergarten. Play fair, be nice. My mind, give it back better than you took it. Treat everybody nice. It's not that hard, but do it, and let's do it in every aspect of our lives.
You had mentioned 25 years ago, of course, you became the first African-American mayor of Dallas. And I wanted to ask you, focusing back on the specific George Floyd incident, if you were mayor of Minneapolis, what would your course of action have been having seen that videotape?
Well, you'd like to believe you do what the mayor and the police chief have done. The more important thing, I tell people, if you're given the reality of today's environment, whether you're the president of the university, the dean of a college, the pastor of a church, you run any big organization, trouble's going to come, particularly now in the age of social media. I mean, just is where everybody's that's got a cell phone is a news person, and that's okay. But also, it's all right, as Common says, to mix a little bit of the energy and the enthusiasm of young folk and the wisdom of the elders. And, those of us who grew up in Texas with families who grew up on farms were always taught, you patch the roof while the sun is shining. So you don't wait until there's a shooting to understand. What we really need to look at our policing and try to help them understand. Every one of our shields, every one of our cars, our mottos on there, some way say to protect and serve. And one thing we tried to do as mayor, I had a police chief who just fanatically embraced community policing, that even in our stops and interactions, he said, you treat people better if you see them as a suspect than you see them as a customer. And if we're police, these are our customers. These are citizens. That de-escalates your thing a little bit. And so you want to make sure you're doing everything you can to train this specific group of employees as well as you can on cultural sensitivity and the power they have. Because once they come out of that academy, probably the average age of our recruits, now are still between 22 and 26. You're giving a 26-year-old the power of God in the form of that service revolver. So you better make sure you've done everything you can to educate them and do it. Then you look broader at those issues we can as a city, which we tried to do to allocate resources and that. And we had our challenges, but you'd like to believe if you've done that, you've been opening that relief. Every time you invest in something that makes us a little more thoughtful, a little more humane, that pressure valve that I've talked about, you're making another turn on that valve and letting a little of that steam off slowly, so that when you do have an incident like you've had in Minneapolis, you don't just have everything blow up and go to hell. But you've got to listen. You've got to be responsible to the community. Running, big colleges are big colleges everywhere. Your challenges at North Texas aren't that much different than University of Texas, University of Oklahoma, Michigan. Big cities are all the same. I think it's time for mayors and police chiefs to realize, even in these protests, everywhere that the police chiefs came out, not in riot gear, not with tanks, not with glass and baton, but the police chief came out in his uniform and said, this is awful. What can we do to help? What do you want me to do? And I'm not saying it was in every case, but in almost every case, the crowd just said, would you kneel with us? Would you say his name? Would you walk with us? And every place we've seen that, these have been peaceful protests. There have been no violence, no burning down. I even take you back to the protests we had in Dallas 3 summers ago when we had that horrible shooting outside your main campus. Those 5 officers were killed. We lost in that. That protest before then had been completely peaceful. The protest was over. The police marched with the protesters. Everyone had a comedy and said, we understand the right to protest is embedded in every principle that we hold dear as Americans. That is the ultimate expression of freedom. And so the more you can do that, at least when these things come, and the more also, I've got to say it, and I know I'm rambling, you've also got to be willing to get away from this when you have incidents like this saying, look, hey, most of us are good guys, he's a bad actor. That's not a bad actor. That's a murder. And the police need to call that out, and they need to be held, and they need to be convicted. When you've done that, as we did in Dallas, where John Crusoe filed charges against Amber Geyer, at least you give the community some sense that, look, there are no special classes for us, for those who commit crime based on how much money we have or whether we wear a uniform. You take a life, you're going to be held accountable. You take a life wrongfully, you'll be held accountable. So you have to do all those things. And I want to be careful because I just know how brutally difficult it is to work through these. So I think the mayor and the police chief in Minneapolis are doing as well as they can under just a horribly difficult situation.
On the subject of leadership, obviously you've led a city, you've served as Secretary of State, you served as ambassador for President Obama. President Obama and his leadership, you worked with him. How do you think he would have reacted to what's going on in America right now as far as race, COVID-19 aside?
Well, we don't have to think about that. And even with COVID-19, and I will say, no matter how much President Trump lies and said it wasn't, we had put in place a protocol for what do you do if you have a pandemic? And I can tell you, even as the U.S. trade representative, I was a part of we would do a surprise mock response where they would say, we just found out a glacier melted, or a meteor's hitting something. And everyone from Homeland Security to FEMA would show up and we would game out everything. That doesn't mean you're going to get everything right, but it means you at least have a protocol that says, here's how we begin to do that. And you look at how President Obama tried to respond and speak to our better angels after that horrible shooting at Newton, which is the only time I saw him cry. I was actually in the Oval Office that day, waiting to do a bill signing on something I was real proud of with all these folks. And the president came out, asked Senator Joe Lieberman, who was then the senator from Delaware, and they found out just how much more horrific. And the one thing I've admired about him, and I know some people think it was a slogan, no drama, Obama, but I've learned in those moments of crisis, one as a leader, you have to decide, do I want to escalate the situation or de-escalate it?
Right.
And going back to my time as mayor, we used to have a joke. The one thing you can't do in a situation like that is be the guy who runs around, everybody be calm. You try to still yourself, realize other people are hurting, but they're looking for you. Quiet yourself. If you're a person of faith, I think that is for you in that moment. Then you bring others together, try to take the best thoughts and responses that you can and say, how do we get through this step by step? What's the most important thing we do right now? What's the most important thing we do tomorrow? But you move from a place of grace, of healing, of trying to, let as much of that steam out as you can. And nobody's going to get it right. But as long as you're doing that, you're being calm, you're being thoughtful, you're being more respectful, you're calling on our sin of grace, you give others the permission to do that. And then we collectively sort of come together and build this wave of love and civility that says we'll get through this together. And you acknowledge the pain. You have to always acknowledge the reality of that pain. But I don't think we have to ask our President Obama. I think one of people believe his strongest moments were doing points of crisis, whether it was after the shooting at Mother Emanuel Church, when he went there to help, the memorial for those 9 peaceful souls killed by Dylan Roof and so many others. And I would say, I know, look, this isn't for that. It draws a stark contrast to the reaction we've seen from this president, who ironically is in Dallas today, right? To raise money, and still cannot acknowledge the fact that peaceful protest is as much a respect and demonstration of our love of this country as anything else. Because if you can't say that those brave men and women who put on the uniform fight to protect our freedoms, but then when we exercise those freedoms, denigrate the citizens for exercising very rights that we fought to protect.
You're a sports fan. I've talked sports with you before, and I can remember you calling into the ticket back in the day when you were mayor, and you got American Airlines Center built. What do you think about the NFL's soft? I'm using the word soft, somewhat of a backtrack on.
It's shameful. It is shameful. It shows how ridiculous their initial response to Colin Kaepernick. But I'm going to take it more to the point than to bring it home. I mean, the contrast between the Mavericks under the leadership of Mark Cuban and Cynthia Marshall, the way they have responded and spoken out and been thoughtful, and the silence of Jerry Jones, who otherwise has something to say about everything, is shameful. And, you know, I'm like everybody else. Our challenge is we love the Cowboys, but, you know, Jerry, get off your yacht, come out of hiding, and speak to us. You have become multi-billionaire on the back largely of young Black men raised in some of the most disparate conditions in America. They need to know that you understand the pain, the humiliation many of us suffer, whether you are the mayor of Dallas or the quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys or just a kid walking down the street in South Dallas. And I just think it is telling how much more progressive it feels that basketball under the leadership of Commissioner Silver, the owner just seem more willing to speak, and the league understanding that's healthy and that's okay than what you're seeing from the NFL, and shame on them.
I wanted to share with you a real life conversation that I had today in a meeting with colleagues that were also white. We talked about Black Lives Matter, and I was sharing the inappropriateness of answering All Lives Matter. Do you have an opinion on that, and can you provide any perspective on that? You know, there's lots of illustrations out there right now, but I would love to hear what your thoughts are.
That makes as much sense as if you were in a horrible car accident and you had a severed artery and they rushed you to the emergency room, and as they were doing triage, you've got an artery that if they don't stop the bleeding, you're going to die. And if the person doing the intake said, well, you got an injury, but everybody here's sick and everybody else has got a cold or discriminated, you're going, this person is dying. It is hurting. The reason we're having this conversation is you cannot watch a video of a man sitting there with almost no life in him, kneeling on another human being's neck for 8.5 seconds. Forget laying on the ground and having your friend put their knee on your back. Just sit in your classroom and have a conversation and stop talking for 8.5 minutes. And then imagine someone having their neck on there while you scream and plead for help. You can't watch someone treat someone that way and not be led to a conclusion. There are too many people in this country, and some, unfortunately, tragically, in law enforcement. You can't do that to another human being and be led to any conclusion other than that they don't think Black lives matter. You cannot watch 3 men in a pickup truck in a neighborhood in Georgia with a video camera chase down, run over, wrestle, and shoot an unarmed young Black kid and say, oh yeah, we do have respect. I mean, when I saw that video, I have never cried more than I have the last month between the death of the surfacing of the videos about Ahmaud Arbery and George Floyd. And I told my wife, I don't know why, I said, even in the state of Texas, the only animal you can hunt from a pickup truck is a wild hog, because we see them as dangerous and have no little regard. And yet, for the surfacing of that video, we would have allowed 3 white men to get away with the killing of an unarmed Black kid. And so we don't have a question that white lives matter. Dylan Roof walked into a church in South Carolina doing a prayer meeting and gunned down and killed 9 people. And when we saw Dylan Roof, he was walking out being escorted by white police officers, not only wearing a bulletproof vest that they put on him, but they stopped at a McDonald's to make sure they had food to eat. We have watched videos of largely white young men protesting something as sensible as saying, during this pandemic, we need to all be safe and wear a mask. And yet they have stormed state capitals in full riot gear with AK-47 screaming and spitting at the police, and the police stand there dispassionately and take it. And yet 12-year-old Tamir Rice was in a park with a BB gun the way half the 12-year-old kids are in America. It was 8 seconds from the time the police arrived in their park and Tamir Rice was dead. And those officers were never forget convicted, never even indicted, never brought to trial. So it is senseless. It is foolish in a case in which it is so obvious that our treatment of Black Americans, particularly Black men in this country, has been so horrific since 250 plus years of slavery and then Jim Crow and others, to try to equate this to a broader issue. If we don't speak to this issue, we're going to be right back in the same place, if not 6 months from now, a year from now, or 2 years from now.
Mayor Kirk, my last question for you has 2 parts to it. Are you optimistic for the future, and what does the future look like for Ron Kirk?
Well, to me, the future looks like that campus there at the University of North Texas in Dallas. I keep coming back to that. Yeah. But I think the power of education, when everybody sitting around the table has a college degree, whether it's a community college degree or other, we shrink our world. We're given the chance to realize, Rudy Prickwell, one of my classmates from Farmersville, Texas, grew up in a town with, 2,000 people. Never seen anybody like me. But there's something about that laboratory of a college campus that says, here's how we work it out. It has been young people that have always held up a mirror to us. And in the venue of that fairy tale, it's always been young people that have walked in a room and say, why the hell's the king naked? Where's his clothes? What's this water fountain, Daddy? Why is there a water fountain for colored people and not white people? It is young people. Martin Luther King was 34 years old when he was killed. That means he was 24, 25 when he was leading the garbage workers strike in Birmingham, then the bus strike. It's always been young people that have called bullshit on us as a society and said it's wrong. You've done it in other cases, you can do it now. And the more that you all come to us and say, you know what, this isn't acceptable. And we have this stupid tool now called Twitter and Facebook and TikTok that we won't allow you to give us all of these fictions that say we can't, and we go, here's what's happening. That's unacceptable. We're going to change it. So we need to take that passion, that energy of our young people. And these protests are largely young Americans. They're the ones that have challenged us and changed our hearts over the years in so many issues. And because they are speaking out and demanding change and demanding equality, I'm hopeful that we'll have a brighter day. But the one thing you young folk have got to do, you all are good at marching, you're good at protesting, you're great at capturing all on TikTok, on Instagram. This can't just be an opportunity for you to say, oh, look, I was at the march. You got to vote. And don't tell me voting doesn't matter. It is your votes that elect city councils, that will appoint a police chief like David Brown, that will elect a district attorney like John Crusoe that we have here in Dallas, that will elect leaders that won't reflexively pass these insidious, stupid laws like Stand Your Ground, that will make sure that our funds are distributed evenly to people around our community. So I am proud of your advocacy. I am inspired by your passion, but I will be much more impressed when I meet you at the polls. And I don't care if it takes all day. You would sleep out for 2 or 3 days if we told you we were going to bring our own Coachella to North Texas State. If you're willing to sleep outside and hang in a tent to go to Coachella, then damn it, if it takes you 8 hours to vote, you do it, because that vote is real. It means change. It'll help us make a better city, a better country, a better North Texas State, and a better world. We need you.
Great message. Mayor Kirk, Ambassador Kirk, thanks so much for making time to visit with us today. And to our listeners, I'm Paul Corliss. Thank you for listening to the We Are North Texas podcast, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for having me.
UNT World is a special place filled with talented and dedicated students, faculty, and staff that do amazing things every day. With our heart in North Texas, we transform lives and create economic opportunity through education. We are North Texas. I'm Paul Corliss. Talk to you soon.